They should have said the poet. The poet. They should have said the poet. The poet.
Sending poets.
This is Sending Poets, a podcast about ideas with the goal of understanding metaphorical truths within the beauty we find in the human experience. My name is John. With me is Bob. Good morning, Bob.
Hey, good morning, John.
Hey, and Tucker. What's up, Tucker?
How's it doing?
And we are finally wrapping up our conversation about contact. Also, we'll be transitioning to the never not interesting topic of human consciousness. Specifically talking about the 2023 Holberg Debate titled, Does Consciousness Extend Beyond Brains? Should be super fun, and guessing that'll last for a few episodes as well. But yeah, let's dive back into contact. And so last episode, I had some homework of just looking into what is the significance of the blue color at the end of the movie when Ellie comes out of the Capitol building. So the just putting like blue color and contact, just Googling that, all the original or all the immediate responses have to do with like the scene in the station with the father on the island and that blue color. So, and I even was like, ooh, I wonder what ChatGPT will say about this. And it was the same thing. I mean, that wasn't really a surprise that it seems like that's the first kind of things that show up. So I specifically asked ChatGPT, but like, what about the scene at the Capitol building when they're walking, Ellie walking to the car, Ellie's supporters have blue clothes and blue signs, blah, blah, blah. Is there significance to that blue? I just thought I'd read what ChatGPT said because this is fun sometimes to, see what it's doing. So anyway, it said the scene you're referring to takes place after Ellie Arroway, played by Jodie Foster, has had her transformative experience during the journey through the wormhole. In this scene, as Ellie and Palmer Joss, played by Matthew McConaughey, walk away from the U.S. Capitol building, Ellie's supporters are shown wearing blue clothes and holding blue signs. I have noticed that, by the way. It seems like the first paragraph ChatGPT does is usually just like a really well-worded kind of reframing of your question. But most of the time, like grammatically and stuff, I think it's like pretty good. Anyway, so it says the significance of the color blue in this scene is open to interpretation, but it could be seen as a visual representation of unity, peace, and a shared understanding. Blue is often associated with calmness, trust, and communication. In the context of the movie Contact, it might symbolize a common ground reached by people who have experienced something extraordinary and are united by their shared belief in the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Well done, ChatGPT. And then it says, Additionally, the choice of blue could convey a sense of optimism and hope for the future. The film explores themes of scientific discovery, faith, and the potential for humanity to come together in the face of the unknown. The use of blue in this scene may emphasize a positive and harmonious outcome, suggesting that the shared experience of contact with extraterrestrial intelligence has the potential to bring people together and foster a sense of unity. Wow, yeah, that sounds good. As with many elements in the films, the interpretation of color symbolism can vary among viewers, and the filmmakers may have intended multiple layers of meaning in the use of blue in this particular scene. Yeah, so I was really happy with that.
What about this? And I don't believe this, but what about this? What if it's like a Easter egg, like a little tip that lends you to believe that the twist is it's all in Ellie's head, or she died, or whatever. Like it never really, you see what I'm saying? Like it's because that stuff doesn't happen in reality. You don't get a bunch of coordinated action. It's symbolic, right? What if the symbolic nature is that can't be real? Like none of that could be real, that it's all like that, right? So either she died in the alien, experiment itself, or she did make. Here's my point. Like, what if we're compelled to believe her, right? We're compelled to believe in her testimony of this thing that nobody else can see.
Mm-hmm.
But what if the reality is, no, she didn't really see it. It's all just a figment of her imagination.
I will see your it's all in her head and raise you. Check this out.
Okay.
Because I noticed that Palmer's scarf color is red. So obviously it's alluding to the movie Tenet, you guys. Obviously red and blue that takes place in the same universe. It's just like one of the next small moves that the extraterrestrials help humans discover is how to invert entropy. Oh my God, you guys, I figured it out.
Hey, I'm going to take it a different direction. They turn the machine on. The aliens came through, put everybody in the Matrix. And the blue is just to calm people. The
blue pill. Yeah. Right.
And the red is like the red lady in the red dress.
Yeah, the red pill. Yeah.
Yep. Well, no, the lady in the red dress. Remember that first thing that the little mouse guy he made?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
I think that all could be true.
Yep. So that was fun. We could dwell on that, but I think because of all these other things we want to talk about, we'll move on here. So the other interesting thing was, in the movie, but I can't remember for sure if it's in the book, but in the movie, there's the focus on without a shred of evidence, right? She comes back from this experience with no proof. But one of the final themes is James Woods' character, the kind of asshole guy that's grilling her in her testimony. And the advisor to the president are talking about the recording, that it recorded static. But what's interesting, she says, is that it recorded 18 hours of static. And so, it's kind of cool, but at the same time, it's like, come on, why wouldn't he have? Maybe it seems like he didn't know that until that moment, because there's something about the exchange where he's like, go on, or so maybe he didn't know. But it seems like, well, if somebody knew there was 18 hours of static, surely they wouldn't have gone to this whole effort of like zero evidence, no shred of proof. You know what I mean? Like, so that's kind of an interesting thing. Because wouldn't you say that's proof? Like 18 hours of recorded static from the 30 seconds of falling, something happened, right?
Well, they didn't. That wasn't in the book, though, right, John? I don't think that was in the book.
Yeah, I don't think it was.
I think I had a problem with that too, and that I liked how Sagan made it an act of faith. He made you swallow this pill, this bitter pill that you had to.
The blue pill or the red pill? Oh, sorry.
Well, yeah. No, the bitter pill. It's the jagged little pill. Okay, you've got the pill that you have to swallow. That what you think is objective is subjective to somebody else. There's just no two ways about it. You cannot make this thing universal truth. It just doesn't exist. And so, looking at the science community and saying, you too have gaps. You too have, indirect knowledge. You too can make an error. I think that's the big thing. So when she gets the little bailout of having the recorded static, it's less elegant than in the book, where at the end she says her computer found the sign in pi, right? Way deep in pi, if you're base 11, it forms a field of zeros with a giant circle made out of ones, right? Some kind of crazy thing like that. So you get the bailout in the book, in that she's proven right, in that her prediction that the alien told her there was some kind of a thing in there, that kind of proves her point, I think. That makes sense, right? That proves her point in the book, but it's definitely a more true proof. Like, the recording's 18 hours or whatever. That has,
right. It is interesting. Yeah, I was just gonna say it is interesting that they didn't talk about, pi more in the movie, but I suppose it might be one of those things that might have just been like hard to kind of explain that right at the end. Certainly
I
harder
think
than
so.
explaining 18 hours of static was recorded. Oh, okay, that's much easier to
so.
just kind of throw in there
Yeah.
at the end.
Well, and what if, you know, they get the recording, it's 18 hours of static, they listen to it once and throw it on a shelf somewhere, but being as the whole movie is and book is based around this signal, it's like, how'd you guys analyze that static? Like,
Yeah,
did you look at
exactly.
it from
That's a
all
good point.
different angles? There, I
Mhm.
mean,
Right.
if you break it into different frequencies, is there not a blueprint for a 0 point energy machine in there somewhere? Like,
Right.
That's a great
Exactly. Yeah.
sequel right there, man. I think you
Yeah.
got the sequel
Exactly.
cooking right now, dude.
Yeah. As
Great idea.
a quick kind of tangent to something else, it's a show that just came. It's on Apple TV called Constellation. There's this like really cool thing where these people go out in the middle of a lake somewhere like around Norway, I think, Sweden. But they point these satellite or radio transmission, radio receivers, right? They point them at things that are happening in orbit, like the International Space Station and stuff, and they record static, but they've kind of trained themselves to hear past the static and hear what's actually happening, and it's done in a really trippy way. It's really like it's a really cool show, and that made me think of that. Yeah, like there probably is something in that static.
Oh, I
Sequel.
love that idea. Signal,
Yeah,
signal in signal. I mean, that's
exactly.
really
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
right. So at the end of the book, one of the other things, and totally, completely different from the movie, which you've talked about, there's, I think, some good reasons for this, but in the book, there's this revelation that Ellie's dad wasn't actually Ellie's biological dad. There was after her dad, you know, uh, who she thinks her dad is after he dies, this other guy comes in and she doesn't really like him, but it turns out, like, if I remember right, I don't know if there was like some kind of affair thing, but her mom got pregnant from this dude, but but she was actually married, right, to what Ted, I guess, is the name, right, of Ellie's dad that she sees in the machine trip.
Yes.
So there's something, where it's like, oh, okay, it's interesting, and again, I think the Ellie in the book is just a different Ellie in the movie. It doesn't seem like that would have done any good in the movie story, but
Well, the mom was dead in the movie, I believe. So I don't
yeah,
think the mom
exactly.
ever had a chance to have this hidden relationship, well, not hidden relationship, but she has to divulge it. The real take-home message is the mom, when her whole life, died, gave the
Yeah,
letter to her real dad, who then gave it to her,
yeah,
and that was a powerful symbol. Oh my goodness, holy cow! And he
yeah,
just was like, at the end of the day, he knew this whole time, and totally inverted his characterization in the book in that last couple pages, right?
yeah,
He went from like the implied zero to a true hero of a guy in that he honored the wishes to not spoil this, let them choose their time of telling their truth, right? The mom had to
yeah,
come clean, but she couldn't do it till the end of her life, actually after her life.
right.
Yeah. And it's kind of I don't know, where does that symbol go? I mean, this is a really interesting part of the novel, I think. Why does he choose to do this at the end? Why does he choose to do this,
Sagan, or he the dad?
Sagan, yeah. Why does he choose to make a twist like this at the end?
Right at the end,
And
yeah.
and one of the things I think is really profound. I'll give a nod to Stacy, my wife, here for this idea. We've been talking about this. The idea that Ellie doesn't really have any connections. Like, she's really kind of untethered, both literally and figuratively, in the book. She can't ever really get past this gap with her mom, right? She
Yeah,
doesn't have,
right.
even though she's world famous, right? And her dad is obviously memories only at this point. She can't have a real relationship. She never has a marriage. You know, everything is all in. She doesn't have a family. Everything's all in on this one quest to find truth in, is there anything out there?
Right.
And so at the very end, you know, to have this thing where all her foundation got rug pulled with one letter. And it's
Yeah.
just such a complex thing of like, she went all over the universe, presumably through wormholes. And yet back at home, she couldn't connect with her own mother and find out her dad is the guy who she hates. Right, her biological father, I should put out, right, is the guy she doesn't like because she feels that he, you know, was the one who caused this rift or whatever between her mom and her dad.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating.
Yeah.
I think it was in some ways just one of his attempts to like humanize the character and to make the story as a whole more believable by saying, you know, this is messy. It's humanity is messy. There a lot of things aren't cut and dry, and our beliefs aren't always accurate. And I don't know. I think it really kind of humanized her. And then he does it several times throughout the novel by pointing out our flaws are kind of what make us human. You know,
Yeah.
nothing's there. There's no ideal person.
Yeah.
We're all
Yeah.
messy.
Yeah. Yeah. All that works for me too. I don't really have much else to say on like that particular thing. I think you guys did a good job there, kind of. You know. So then one of the, I think it's like technically the second to last scene in the movie. I didn't write this down. I think it says 18 months later, or maybe it's years later. I can't remember, but it's at the is it VLA, Very Large Array, where the signal was first, you know, captured, discovered. Ellie is there with a whole bunch of kids, like on a field trip, and it's so great because like she's teaching, you know, like she, you know, they're asking questions. She's doing a really good job with like, I think a kid says like, you know, is there life out there or something, and she says, what do you think? I thought that was so good, you know, like,
Yeah.
you know, she's really encouraging, like keep asking good questions and stuff. And then she brings back the line, you know, something about, you know, if it is just us, seems like an awful waste of space. So I love that they brought that back. And then the very last, then they show Ellie sitting at I can't remember if it is the Grand Canyon, but you know, there's a good scene. I think when she, shit, I don't think it's when she discovers a signal, but there's a scene where she's sitting at the top of this canyon, and then they close the movie that way too. But it's, you know, there's like a transition into night that happens really, it's subtle, but like you can tell that she's probably just sitting there until it gets dark. Pretty cool. And then it pans up, and then in the bottom right it says for Carl. And I'm a fucking crier, you guys, you know that. So I think all 3 times I watched it recently, I'm just like, you know what I mean? Like it just the simple thing about 2 words, like, and just for Carl right at the end, and the music, of course, like sometimes it's just all about the music. It pushes me over the edge. So yeah, it's a beautiful ending.
How tragic that this coincided with his untimely passing. I mean, you know,
exactly right.
So sad.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to think it's like Steve Jobs or something, like, so, you know, like right as something creative is coming out or something, you know, it's like very like Jimi Hendrix or like, right, like somebody just totally way too soon kind of a thing, obviously.
Right. Yeah, totally. Tragedy is a fitting word for sure. So it's yeah, so that's how the movie ends. Yeah, beautiful ending. And so a couple of things, like final thoughts here. I know, Bob, you were curious about bringing the Fermi paradox into this. So
yeah,
essentially, Fermi paradox is the discrepancy between the lack of evidence of extraterrestrials and the apparent high likelihood of their existence. Again, because it would seem like an awful waste of space, right? So yeah,
like
did you want to?
Waste of space, exactly.
Yeah,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Did you want to kick that off? Like,
So yeah, so what is? I mean, this is a sci-fi exploration, obviously, of monumental proportions. So nothing compared to that, but it does reflect what is, what is the answer? Are we alone? I think it's a really big answer or question. Are we alone? Right? What is the answer to that question? I think that is a fundamental requirement that we have this information. I don't know how you would prove that we're alone, because you'd have to prove that there's nothing anywhere.
Right.
And it would only take one example of there being something out there to prove we're not alone. So
Yeah.
it's like a very binary. Now, how alone are we? Like if there's, one per galaxy, one intelligent life form per galaxy, let's just say. Well, we
Yeah.
would still not be alone, but we're never going to see these people, obviously, and they're never going to see us. And right, like if you're able to observe an entire galaxy that has been transformed into the equivalency of one giant pyramid, right? Like this is, we're here, we did this thing. I mean, it's totally conceivable that you would have the technical ability from right about our level to begin making probes that are self-replicating, and they would go out and grab an asteroid and grab a bunch of material and self-replicate and then spread and then go grab another and keep on going. And even at non-light speeds, like actual chemical propulsion speeds, I think it only takes about 100,000 years to spread pretty much across a galaxy if you were to able to make a replicating probe. So it's 100,000 years, call it a million, just a drop in the bucket. So to conceivably think that there would be some evidence, although difficult, meaning you would have to be a really substantial level of intelligence. So go back to the Fermi paradox, just to make sure we're on the same page. It's really not about life, because life could be, bacteria or whatever. It could be microscopic, right? It could be what the Fermis say. Why is there no evidence? Why don't we have radio signals of their TV shows?
Yeah.
Like, why is there nothing? There's nothing. There's no light. There's zero signal. And so that's the great question. So I don't know. Let's look at the options real quick. So what's the option of us being the only one? Let's just say, is life probably scarce? I would guess no, based on the number of sun-like stars and habitable-like planets that appear to be everywhere. It appears like we're not a common situation to have a star like ours with planets surrounding it. It just doesn't seem like it's a one-off thing. It's everywhere. Yeah. Okay. And then think about how much time has it taken. Are we like just super early? Probably not. 13, 14 billion years. Probably not. It seems like life arose almost immediately, in a geological time frame from the creation of the Earth. It was a very early onset, but that's not intelligent life.
Yeah.
So we got like the concept of a great filter, something that's a universal phenomenon or characteristic that applies everywhere, assuming that life is definitely reasonable and it's probably plentiful. But how is it that the filter keeps it from evolving to intelligent level such that it can demonstrate its existence throughout galaxies?
Right.
So that's the question. So obviously, if you have very common life, I would think intelligence is a very likely adaptation, but maybe not. Let's go back to life, like at the very beginning. Think about how difficult it is to form that first life form through, let's just say, random, arbitrary physical events. So nobody planned it. Nobody made it happen through magic or godlike powers. Let's just say, how hard would it be for random molecules to bang into each other and create that very first thing? How impactful is that? I don't know. It seems like it happened pretty quick here. We don't have any evidence of it anywhere else.
Yeah.
But some sort of evidence of some sort of life elsewhere would be a powerful indicator that, it's much more plentiful than just nothing anywhere. But then think about like how difficult it might be to get a nucleus, how difficult it might be to get the mitochondria. how difficult it might be to get just all these really complex fundamental requirements, to get the metabolism just right and to get, the cell membrane to work properly. All these things, I mean, it might just be so complex, such an improbable series of events that we might be the only ones out there. I mean, I think we have to kind of.
And it certainly is taken so long, right? I mean, again, the drop in the bucket thing, we're just a small, tiny fraction of the whole time period of just our planet.
But we can
it's
scan back through light, though. This is the beauty of the concept. As you look farther away, it's further back in time. So we have the ability to scan many, many, many different ages of the universe, so to speak, and look at different levels of development as it was back then. So nothing, right, is that we're looking far away is as we see it. That doesn't exist. Where it is in reality, it's much different than as we see it now, right? Because of the time it takes for the light to travel.
So in other words, in the moment right now, there could be other civilizations, but we're that's kind of why you said, are we early? Right?
Yeah, I mean,
there's no way to know
away,
in the moment.
Well, if we're far away from somebody, even if they're like us right now, this second, if they're 5,000 light years away, you would never be able to know that they're like us right now, this second, for another 5,000 years.
Right.
Assuming you could see them. And whatever you see from them is as they were when that light initially reflected off their planet and bounced into space heading our direction.
Yeah.
So we'll never be able to get on that same page. So there is we're not so worried. That's how the wormhole bypasses all that, by the way. Just, you can snap your fingers and be many light years away. So that's a convenient, usage of theoretical physics. I think it's brilliant. But the reality is we would have to play with observing a civilization or some form of demonstrable intelligence far, far away. So let's just say probabilistically that there is a likelihood. Let's just say, okay? Might be very difficult. And it might be so difficult it never happens but once right here. But let's just say it's actually everywhere. What would be an explanation for not seeing anything?
Because you have to be looking. You have to be looking in the right spot, right? You have to be kind of tuned to.
Right? It might be
or,
difficult for us to see it. We're not technologically advanced. We can't zoom into planets that are light years away and see them, with resolution and all that stuff. So granted, we don't know there's any life anywhere, let alone intelligent life. But what I'm trying to say is the likelihood with the scope, meaning the size and length of time that the universe has existed, gives us many places that we can go and look for one instance of demonstrable intelligence. Okay. So we single one anywhere. So what I'm saying is, what if life is plentiful? And what if intelligence is a very powerful strategy that doesn't guarantee evolution will end up towards an intelligent solution? But let's just say it's reasonable to think that intelligence would be one of the levels of fitness living creatures would, solve for. And what if the length of time of the universe is such that there should be plentiful examples of observant examples of intelligent life out there, but we don't see any. So what if the true sign of intelligence is only visible somewhere else? This is one of these theories of why would you not expand? Everything alive expands. It's living nature to try to expand and reproduce. That's part of the foundation of what life is. If you can define life, it's very difficult. But imagine this: how would you explain, say, hyper dominant, hyper intelligent life that does not show examples of expansion? And what I'm proposing is that the expansion is in a direction that is not observable. So you would have to then say the solution is, imagine this. So imagine you have a balloon, just a normal balloon, and you're blowing up this balloon. And as you blow it up, you can put dots around the balloon. And as you keep blowing it up, the distance between each dot grows and grows and grows.
Yeah.
On the skin, right? But think about the skin not as like a two-dimensional wrapping, but it has a thickness to it as well. So imagine that thickness if you exist inside the rubberized shell of the balloon itself. Okay. If you exist inside that, it looks infinite to you because you could go around and around and around. It looks infinite, but in all directions you can look, it looks the same. But we know from an objective point of view, from a outsider's point of view, that there's space in between the layers of the balloon. So you can go inside and you can go outside. So it's really not taking up all the space that we can observe. But if you're inside that rubber, it looks like, you could go anywhere in any direction for an infinite amount of time.
Yeah.
So the reality would be then, hey, those creatures, intelligent creatures that figure out whatever, the new up and down direction is, and they go there, then they would not be observable, but it does not mean that they are not intelligent.
Kind of like bordering on like dimension stuff, fourth dimension, like flatland.
It's 100%
right?
dimensional. Yes, 100% dimensional. The point being that if you say that life is very common and ubiquitous and the length of the universe is long, there has to be a reason then that intelligence is not evident. And so without any other direct evidence, you could though conclude, speculatively, that there might be a place that the intelligence goes to that you don't see.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, it's one of those explanations. How would you explain not seeing anything out there for, the entire scope of the universe? How would you explain not seeing anything? So let's go for everybody else. What's your Fermi paradox solution?
Yeah. Tucker, did you have
Yeah, I know Bob and I disagree on this to some extent, but part of me has to say we might already have contact. There's to me there's too many people who have seen things that they don't understand, which you can write a lot of that off. But the fact that we have people in Congress now saying they've seen pictures that we possess these things, there's something there. So I what it is, I don't know, but I do know in the last probably decade in the whole UFO world, there has been a shift from extraplanetary visitors to extra dimensional. And I don't know why that exactly happened, but there seems to be a shift going on right now where people are saying the things that we've seen here are not necessarily from another planet, they're from another dimension. Now, it's all speculation, and that's the frustrating thing with the whole idea is it's until either something lands on the White House lawn or a government somewhere on the planet goes, here's what we know. It's all speculation. But I know I've seen something in the night sky I cannot explain by any human tech or natural occurrence. But I have to also pare that down to mistaken observation. How do we actually know what we know? It's all speculation. It's turtles all the way down. Part of me thinks there's something that's already been here, and part of me will always need proof. So that kind of leaves you in this gray area where it's like, I want to believe, but I'm like Mulder. I want to believe, but I need something that I can hold. you know? I don't know. I think the whole extra dimensional aspect to me is more in a way terrifying than an alien, because it's like I can envision another rock floating in space that has life on it, I don't even know how to envision something that would be from a dimension I can't even conceive. Like,
Yeah.
and the fact that, mathematically in some circles they say as many as 11 dimensions in our universe. Well, it's like I can't even conceptualize the fourth one. Like, what are you doing to me? Like,
Yeah.
now it's just magic, Like,
Yeah. Just the scope of the universe. Like, so I don't know where I sit in here. Bob, when you first mentioned like, hey, this would be a good kind of closing thoughts for the contact discussion, I think the first place my brain went was, we don't know because we're not supposed to. We're not like evolved enough. Maybe, there is other life and it knows we're here, but we're just not ready. I don't know. I hearing both of you guys take, I think I don't really like feel comfortable settling on that. I think that was just like, well, that's just my first thought, and then I didn't really spend too much time thinking about it. But like, yeah, the unbelievability or whatever that you were just talking about, Tucker, that when I watch videos and read things about just the size of the universe, just the number of stars just in the Milky Way galaxy, and that's one galaxy, right? It's just those things are in the same way um, the dimensional thing, it seems unimaginable. It's so unbelievable. It's like hard to, not just hard, but almost, really impossible to really wrap my head
let's
around
use
all
this.
that.
Use the Milky Way. I think this is a perfect example. Piggybacking off of that video you sent around, you'll have to credit it in the show notes. But imagine being inside of a disk, and you're trying to figure out you're inside of a disk. Like, that's at the level you have to start visualizing this, because what you're going to see is not going to be looking like what you can visualize a disk from looking down on it from above.
Yeah,
You're going to
being
be
inside
inside
it.
the edge,
Yeah.
right? You're inside the edge of a disk, and to visualize, that's going to look like a line to you. It's essentially going to look like a smudgy line towards the center of the disk and a little faint line everywhere away from the center of the disk. That's hard to visualize, right? That's really hard to conceptualize, that when you're inside of something that has, say, a disc shape, but it looks just like a milky streak in the sky. That's where you have to figure out, how can I look at this thing from above, not from within? So when you're inside the thing, it looks like a certain way. And that's what I'm getting at about being inside the skin of the balloon. Like, everything's going to look like the skin of the balloon to you in all directions, every which way, if you're bound by being part of the skin of the balloon.
Yeah.
There's only people outside, above, and inside the balloon itself who could show you that, hey, no, you're actually missing, a lot more space. Like, you think there's this much space in your universe, but there's a much more spacious bit of space above and below that. And it's hard to wrap your mind around.
Yeah, it is. It does seem like, I don't know, encouraging for me to think about things in terms of dimensionality. Because again, just without some, wormhole type bridge to get from one end to the other, just it's so discouraging to think like, the only way we could do this is by like propelling ourselves, and even at like as close to the speed of light, it still takes thousands of years to, like, oh dude, that sounds like,
well, think of wormholes.
Useless.
So we've been talking about wormholes. Well, think about the wormhole, though. We've been talking about wormholes this whole entire time about contact, because it uses wormholes. So wormhole is the metaphor of an apple, right? So you're on the skin of the apple. So if you want to go from one side of the apple all the way over to the other side, you got to go around the apple.
Yeah.
And the wormhole is literally a worm that just eats through its way.
Yeah, it goes through it.
The other.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing, is it is a dimensional solution for Sagan himself, I'm saying. That's his root concept of wormhole, and the ability to exploit a curvature of space-time, you know, that violates essentially speed of light. You know, that's what you got to do. You got to violate the speed of light. If you want to go anywhere in the universe, you kind of got to go faster than the speed of light.
Yeah. Well, going through a wormhole, is that the same thing as actually traveling the speed of light, or is there?
Effectively. So if it were to take, let's say, one day to go from one side of the apple to the other side of the apple at the speed of light, but by drilling through the middle, you can go there in half a day. You're not technically going faster than the speed of light, but you got there faster than anybody who's traveling at the speed of light on the skin of the apple gets there.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's why, because I don't know, was Star Trek one of the first, or yeah, I
Warp
don't know, when
drive.
did Warp Drive, and then light speed, Star Wars, and then there's a whole plethora of sci-fi where they just generically went FTL, faster than light.
Yep. See,
um
that's the whole thing. Going back to Tucker and I, talking about visible or tangible evidence of alien life here and now, is that I think it's so improbable to move physical bodies, physical things, in interstellar distances. I think, and now I'm not talking interdimensionally, that's, separate, but anything that could be evidence of, say, like a flying saucer or something, without evaluating the evidence itself, I discredit it to a very high degree, just because of the improbability, in my opinion, of any intelligent life evolving close enough to any other intelligent life to physically go there, because of the limitations of the speed of light.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree.
But
Now,
dimensionally, it does change the rules. I mean, if you want to play that game, I'm
Yeah.
playing that game, so it's fair game, I think.
So the other thing I want to say about the Fermi paradox, especially when it comes to like not hearing anything, we have amazing radio telescopes, but we don't really have a frame of reference on how receivable like our transmissions are from even the nearest star. Do those waves that we have created become so what's the word I want to use, so distorted just by background noise that they wouldn't even be a message by the time it gets to the nearest star? And we don't have a way to test that because we can't get to the nearest star. So we're operating on this assumption that, if an alien sent out a message, we'd be able to receive it at our distance without it being so distorted by noise that we can still get the message from it. And
would you agree it's a function of our primitive nature? Like, we are so primitive, we literally just got the radio not but 100 years ago or whatever, right?
Yeah,
like,
and
we
I mean,
realize
I could also envision, say, a planet that the background noise of the planet is so loud, whether it's from wind, from volcanism, from just plate tectonics that are extremely active, that the actual noise level on the planet is so loud that it was never functionally beneficial to develop hearing. That you have to communicate through pheromones or light-based signals or scent or taste somehow, that hearing is just not.
Well, let's bridge the gap, because I started with evidence at the galactic level. You'd have to see a galactic-sized pyramid, and then you were talking now at the planetary level. But let's talk about like a mid-scope, like a Dyson sphere. So Dyson sphere is to take a star and capture, a fair percentage, if not all, of the, energy coming off the star as your supply of energy. And so why would we not see various formations of Dyson spheres out there, or evidence of it? Like, we can detect a planet passing in front of its own star and detect the very, very small amount of blocking of the light, in its period as it travels across in front of its star compared to us. And we can measure that. We should be able to measure Dyson sphere progress. And that seems like a very basic thing. It would be way above our level of tech, but it's totally conceivable, right? Is to put solar panels essentially right around your star. So you should be able to see that. So
and to be devil's advocate on that, I think technologically, I don't think that's the most efficient means to produce power. I would think, to me, why would you need to build solar panels completely around the sun when you can create a fusion reactor planet side that creates its own sun?
I don't think you would, but then if you have a fusion power reactor, you would send probes out to gobble up asteroids and make more copies of themselves and populate the galaxy in 100,000 years.
Yeah.
And that would be obvious. So that's what I'm getting at. I'm trying to you're totally right, but I'm just saying, like, we don't have any evidence of any of these things.
No, we don't.
So what would then explain the lack of evidence? This goes back to that famous the dog who didn't bark, right? Like, you have to take evidence that's not there, but it's got to be not there for a peculiar reason. And the dog didn't bark because it was the owner coming home, right? That's the take home message, is the dog always barks. But why didn't the dog bark? Because it was the owner coming home. So anyway, the point is trying to find a solution, this Fermi paradox, trying to find a solution to say, why isn't there something where it should be?
Yeah, and that's the whole question.
Yeah.
Because to me, I would have thought by now we did hear something, and we haven't.
I mean, ultimately, to your point, though, about like signal, how difficult it might be to reach signal, I think gravitational waves will be the universal language, if you will, of signal communication in the universe, such that once you can gather enough energy, you should be able to make some kind of an impact that would create, some sort of a rippling that is now going to travel at the gravitational wave scale. And that's going to go everywhere eventually. That's the ability to communicate at scale, at universal scale.
And it's hard because we all think from a very humanistic perspective, and we are probably the most violent and expansionist species on the planet, aside from maybe bacteria or fungi. And so we see that from our mindset that, okay, we have this technology that allows us to spread throughout the galaxy, and so that's absolutely what we would do. But I don't necessarily believe that would be the same for any other species. I mean,
that's totally
yeah.
Fair.
If it's
to be able to visualize like a gas cloud that's conscious or a star that's conscious. I mean, it's very right. That's like near impossible. So how would you then understand how they communicate with others, right? Like that. It's a very good point, I think, of how difficult it would be to detect alien life if you can't understand its possibility where you're looking.
Yeah. It's all like a factor of the stage of evolution that, we're in, right? Like, and again, just the difficulty of, like you said earlier, Bob, if a planet is 5,000 light years away, well, without some type of wormhole bridging, there's no way to know what's happening right now unless we wait 5,000 years.
Yeah, zero. Yeah, you can't possibly. It's literally it's like a different place. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, devil's advocate again. If you had another sentient race out there who wanted to communicate, would they even attempt until they knew that a planet had a way to communicate back faster than light? Well, there's no point in having a conversation with a planet that's even 11 light years away, because you can't have a conversation where there's 11 years between each sentence.
Yeah.
I think I agree with that, but I'm at the unintentional exposure, and this
Yeah.
the best way I've heard it put. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he said we should be seeing alien garbage everywhere.
Yeah, I agree.
Like there's no way that they are not going to have broken things thrown about that that look unnatural, that just are not going to be normal. They're not going to be explainable by anything other than, man, they just wrecked a planet and now it's just broken in pieces.
Uh-huh.
And it does weird things. You know what I mean? Like it's just weird, something like that. There should be garbage. There should be some kind of like byproduct or something. If you think that life is ubiquitous and it's plentiful throughout time and should be evident in all directions and all these things. I mean, it's just peculiar to not have any evidence other than human evidence of testimonials. Let's just say.
Yeah. Well, to bring it back to contact real quick and what you said, Tucker, about like if why would a species, or you didn't say it that way. You said that they might not send something out without an expectation that they're beaming it to somebody that can send it back, kind of a thing. But it made me wonder, like, well, I don't know this for sure, but in contact, and it's in real life, right? The the Germans broadcast, because they at that time weren't they was just they were real proud of the power that they had built in being able to broadcast so broadly, right? The Olympic opening ceremony, it was sort of a flex, right? Wasn't it just like, look at how, but at the time, was it known that like actually those radio signals are going to go out into space? Like that wasn't the intent, right? It was just, look, we can broadcast
It was not
this.
the intent. Yeah, it was inadvertent.
So
Good point.
I guess devil the advocate.
Exposure.
Yeah, devil the advocate, that because I was thinking about that too. Like, well, we did it like not really knowing what we were getting, what was gonna happen by broadcasting signals. We didn't know that they were just gonna go out into space. So it seems reasonable that we wouldn't be the only intelligent life that could do that. But again,
I think that's very fair.
If we pick something up, it's like, yeah, but that's from how many years ago? In the case of contact was 26 years, right? To go one direction, and then 52 years worth of the one, taking turns with sentences, right? 52 years, like, wow.
And think about this. So if there is another sentient race out there capable of detecting our signals, in literally 10 years' time, they detected our first signal and our first nuclear detonation.
Yeah,
interesting.
I like that. Yeah, right.
So, it's like, oh, we have new neighbors. And then less than a decade later, it's like, yeah, I don't think we need to talk to those people. Like, lock the doors.
Well, let's go there for the Fermi paradox. Let's go there, in that one of the solutions is that all races of intelligent creatures kill themselves. They're self-destructive. That's why you don't see it anywhere, because once they get to a certain level of technology and ability, meaning all life, everywhere, every time, just like power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, what if all creatures of intelligence that get to a planetary dominance level die from hubris?
Yeah.
They either war each other to death, or they domesticate themselves with a idiocracy style, just an emergent decrepitude of the populace because of how easy life is as things get better. So it's like there's a really I think a valid way to look at this is there a universal principle, and then if there is, how would we avoid it?
Yeah, because it's, if you look at, we'll just say fictional UFOs. So they've created some form of 0 point energy, or some energy production means that it's so far beyond us we can't even understand it, and that's the only way you'd be able to travel distances or create wormholes, is just basically having limitless energy. Well, limitless energy is a tool, but it's also a weapon. And so, you know, if you can create a 0 point energy device that's literally pulling electricity from the background radiation or the quantum vacuum or something, well, you can then harness that energy to make a space laser or a spaceship. You know, it's so part of me is going, well, it's good that it's bad that we're not seeing any aliens, but it's also good that we're not seeing any planets being vaporized with our telescopes.
Well, what about this, Tucker? What about this? What about let's do it good-naturedly. Let's say it's not weapons. Let's say it's particle accelerators, and they're doing it for science. And at some level, fundamental level, if you tap through it, like the cat, you know, the curiosity kills the cat is what I'm getting at. What if the universal principle is intelligence is curious, and it will forever and always try to find a fundamental truth. And there's one door that if you open it, it's 0 point energy and it makes a black hole right in your lap, and you kiss your ass goodbye. And so then what my point would be is, what would you learn from that? Would you learn that you have to shut down curiosity? It's a very, very strange problem to have, I think.
Yeah.
That whole idea is the concept for that second Talos principle.
Yeah.
We have the knowledge. Do we trust ourselves to have that knowledge? And you can make choices in that game and get different endings of, you know, it's our duty to use knowledge. It's our reason for being, and we have to use the knowledge that we have. But there's an equal argument that says we are simple creatures and we shouldn't trust ourselves with that kind of power, and it should be destroyed. And
Pandora's box, which open it can't
totally
close
is.
it.
Totally is. I mean,
yeah.
And you could infer by the lack of intelligent life form evidence in the scope of the universe for all time and all places. And I'm not saying this personally, I'm just arguing, obviously, but you could say that, hey, unfettered expansion of exploration, whatever you want to call it, is potentially a doomsday device. And you're only going to find out it's doomsday when it's too late, right? You'll have passed some critical threshold. Maybe it's genetic modification. Maybe everybody learns that, you know, maybe all life is somehow composed of, you know, a form of DNA or RNA or something. And you just realize how easy it is to manipulate your own code. Just create whatever kind of people you want to be.
Brave New World.
Yeah, brave. But maybe
Yeah.
maybe that always inevitably leads to being able to put all necks into one noose. Like it breeds in a brittleness or a vulnerability that is, I don't know if you guys ever saw the South Park episode with the crooked neck turkey. Where all the
That's
turkeys,
like an old one, I think, right?
That's so old, man. So it
Yeah.
shows my age. Okay. So the turkeys are making fun of this one crooked necked turkey. And his head is down at his feet level, and he's just like the dumbass turkey. And everybody picks on him, makes fun of him. Until one day they round them all up in a truck, drop them off at the processing plant, and a giant spinning blade comes off at neck height, kills all the turkeys.
Yeah. Except for him.
Except for this little broken-necked turkey. And he just gobbles his way on out of there. But guess what?
Yeah.
Bottleneck. He is now the dominant turkey.
Yeah.
So, you know, like there's ways to have ability, a strength, let's say, because if everybody has a straight neck, you will not survive that one event.
Yeah.
It's only through this weird random mutation, this Darwinian level event, that you can protect yourself by breeding in a sort of a weakness in that if you're too non-diverse, I don't know what the opposite of diverse is, if you're too monolithic, if everything is exactly the same, then that one time when the game changes and it's such that everybody who's this way is now hugely disadvantaged, That could be the extinction level event.
Interesting. Yeah. Kind of makes me think of the hot dog fingers and everything everywhere all at once. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
Oh yeah.
Still have not seen it.
But yeah, wow. So I don't know. I mean, obviously we weren't expecting to get a solution to Fermi paradox. I mean, that's part of why it's called a paradox, right? Like it's there to promote and provoke the conversations, right? So can you guys believe, like, we're already like an hour into this. Like I do want to make good on our transition here into talking about the Holberg thing. At the same time, I was like, man, fuck, do we just go like 6 full episodes on contact? But I think
would say
want
you do the intro. Do the intro, man. I think you do the intro, set it up.
Yeah, we'll see how far we get.
Yeah, I think it's such a cool concept, and a hat tip to Tucker, obviously, for bringing this to our attention. Very cool setup. I really dig it. I can't wait till you pitch it.
Yeah. So, but I almost feel like I should have a bell or something, like, we made it I would say more than 5.5 episodes, just, from contact as the source of our wow. So anyway, ding, 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 we did it.
Ding, ding, yay.
I do want to reference that video that you shared, John, though, and if you could throw a link up somewhere for people, because it was something I truly didn't know. But basically the concept of the video is this guy shows the whole night sky and he turns one thing off, and the one thing is the Milky Way. And literally every star is gone, and the only thing that's left is a tiny little smudge that's the next galaxy.
Andromeda galaxy, right? Yeah.
Like, even as big a space geek as I've claimed to be, like, I don't think I ever realized that concept, that every star in our night sky that we can see with the naked eye is in our home galaxy.
Yeah, you told me that a while ago, Bob. So when that happened, I was like, I remember Bob saying this. That same thing. That just every.
But I also think
I
think it's amazing that, like, as a species, we built the Hubble Space Telescope, and somebody, like, had to fight for telescope time, and what he did was pointed it at the most desolate spot in the night sky where we had never observed anything. And when they got the data back, there was thousands of galaxies in that blank spot. Millions. I mean, it's the Hubble Deep Field View, I think, is the famous picture. But it's like we pointed it at nothing and found more than we could even comprehend.
Yeah.
And they're old to us. They're so old to us. Like, imagine, like, whatever signal you get now from that. Let's imagine we have 1000x technology, so we can use that signal and get resolution. Whatever we see, millions, billions of years ago. That's what's so mind trippy, is that everything in our locale, like our Milky Way galaxy, everything it's just so locked in, but based on time and space. Like, we are just isolated out here. The universe is so preposterously huge.
Yeah.
I put it like we're like a giant river, and in the giant river there's boulders and eddy currents and stuff like that, and we're like just a tiny little piece of foam in one little eddy current of an entire giant Amazon river. I mean, it's just so unimaginable to think of how minuscule we are at the galactic level, at the Milky Way level.
Just at that level, yeah, right.
Yeah, we're not even like the foam in the river. We're like an electron
in the foam.
In one bubble of the foam. I agree. That's
preposterous.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I will find that link and put it in the show description for sure. Yeah, it was. I saw a second video from that guy, so it's he does a good job with kind of.
What you shared with the
perspective.
TikTok, I think I saw, John, the original video. I think it was on Netflix. I can't remember what, but we watched it as a family one night. It was really
nice.
cool.
Yeah,
it's a full length hour show or something.
Yeah.
But I love the perspective.
Awesome.
Real quick, and then we'll dip on this. The ability to shift perspective. So think about all the history of all humans throughout all time. How long did it take us to realize we're in this disc? How difficult is it just to place our own position within our own galaxy?
Right.
Like, it's so revolutionary to be able to have the mind's eye view of rotating the Milky Way galaxy around and look at one of the spiral arms and say, we're like, 2/3 out or whatever. And like, that's just preposterous. But without that, you really don't know where you're at. Like, whether you look
Right.
out at the deep field or not, like, if you can't put your own position, I think it's very difficult to get your mind's eye right. So it's a very powerful thing to realize your position in the Milky Way galaxy.
Right. Definitely mind blowing to just ponder. All right, so I did find a line in the book Contact that is a good. Did I say Contact? Contact. That I think is a good transition into this Holberg debate on consciousness, and it's the scene where it's a character who's not in the movie, but it's the science advisor to the president, Ken Heer, and he is a love interest even for Ellie in the book. But they're walking through like Arlington Cemetery, I think, and or maybe it's a Vietnam Memorial, but they're walking through like it's a somber scene, but he's like fascinated by a caterpillar like that's crawling on a twig. He picks it up and he's just sort of like way more preoccupied with that than anything else. And there's some back and forth, but the line he says, I love it. The line he says is it's hard to kill a creature once it lets you see its consciousness, which was profound to me because the wording, not it's hard to kill a creature once you see its consciousness, once it lets you see its consciousness, implying that the caterpillar has this will of its own to like let you see its consciousness. So it was just very like interesting take, and I thought that was like a perfect kind of transition into this Holberg debate. And yeah, again, Tucker, thanks for finding this and passing it along. So some background about what is the Holberg debate. It's in honor of this guy Ludwig Holberg, 18th century writer, essayist, philosopher, historian, and playwright from Bergen, Norway, and that's where the debate takes place. It started in 2016. I looked through some of the previous topics. They all sound interesting, but three of them I wanted to mention that I haven't watched yet, but I think I'll want to eventually. In 2022, they did one called "Will Fear Keep Us Safe?" In 2020, they did "Is Global Stability a Pipe Dream?" And in 2017, they did, and this is really interesting. In 2017, they did this propaganda, facts, and fake news. And one of the debaters is Julian Assange of WikiLeaks fame. That sounds really interesting. So I might start there of those three. But again, all of them sound cool. But anyway, so the 2023 debate was, does consciousness extend beyond brains? And there's three. It's great. The moderator did an awesome job, and he kind of explained normally debates follow this sort of format where there's 3 points of view. There's the defender of the faith who's there to sort of, this is all the established knowledge and I'm going to defend it. There's the heretic who's sort of the opposite, to say like, no, we should be questioning these, long established truths. And then there's the social democrat, is how he described it, as the person kind of in the middle that's kind of like, well, we can have some of that and some of this, and we can probably, find that. So the moderator goes, for this debate, we're not doing any of that. All three of them are basically heretics. They're all kind of saying like, there's probably something new here. We can throw out all the, established, ideas and kind of think of this in a new way. So that was a great primer, I think, for him to start it that way.
I think that setup is the home run, by the way. The secret sauce is when you're doing a spectrum of opinions, it's really hard to focus on one of the countercultural opinions. Like, it just doesn't get enough weight in discussion. It's, 1/3 of the setup is the counter position of the establishment. And really, this is like a setup where it's just three counter establishment points of view, and then they get the freedom for once. I've never heard this anywhere else. Of three counter establishment points of view, they get to talk about it.
Yeah. And on the topic of consciousness, seems perfect, right? Because there really isn't. I don't know if there really is. established truths for a defender of the faith to take a point on anyway, right?
That's a good point. And
But one of the
everybody gets a dog in this fight as well. You can't say
yeah,
anybody doesn't have a subjective point of view.
right, yeah. One thing the moderator mentions that he says the point of the debate is to consider the consequences, if any, of the things that are brought forth, if any of them are true. I wanted to call that out because I don't know that they really talked about that too much. It was still like super fascinating, but I don't know if they got back to like, well, what are the real consequences? I suppose, just in the normal course of conversation, but he for sure didn't like make a point to bring it back to asking that periodically and what are the consequences if this is true, but those are kind of sprinkled in throughout the
that's missing. I think that is an important component, but they're really at the foundation level of first. Can we get some sort of consensus from the heretical side of what our boundaries look like? I think that's really, it was an argument about like, where do we draw the lines here?
Yeah. Yep. And so what I thought I'd do is just say a little bit about the three speakers and kind of their high level point of view. And then I was going to ask you guys if there was one that you kind of related to. So the first speaker, Anil Seth from University of Sussex. I've mentioned this guy before, I think definitely in conversation with you two, but in an episode, I'm guessing. But he did a TED Talk a while ago about his kind of take. I think I put this here. His decades-long working theory is that the brain is a prediction machine whose best guesses are based on criteria of how useful those guesses are in the business of staying alive. It's very similar to your subconscious model that you've talked about many times, Bob. But this TED Talk that I remember seeing a while ago, he was saying that, talking about reality and how we perceive reality, and he said, perception is like controlled hallucination, and hallucination is uncontrolled perception. And we're all hallucinating all the time, including right now. It's just that when we all agree about our hallucinations, we call that reality. So I love that. So that's kind of his take, is it's very like, it seems mostly limited to the brain is what his kind of, I think, take is, consciousness mostly limited to the brain. Then the second speaker is Tanya Luhrmann, who's a professor of anthropology and psychology at Stanford University. And being an anthropologist, it seems like most of her focus is on observing and talking, getting like empirical evidence from people, and specifically about like religious experiences. There was a lot of talk about, another being or higher power or whatever. So and she has a lot of really interesting things to say too. And then the third guy, Rupert Sheldrake. So he's a biologist, philosopher, spent time at Cambridge and Harvard. And his kind of high level take, I gathered, was that consciousness does exist outside the brain, almost like it's a field or something that maybe we all kind of tap into. And again, really interesting things he said that, unique. All three of them have this unique perspective, and it was really fascinating to hear. And one of the first things you said, Tucker, when you shared this was like how respectful of a debate it is. Like, it's exactly, I felt like it's the exact kind of conversation I want to hear when people are disagreeing, right? Nobody's talking shit. Nobody's like, no, fuck you. You're an idiot. Like, there's plenty of that out there. And
I think
most of the time, I still think that's helpful.
British, by the way. 3 of the 4 are like, right? They're British, I think, maybe. Or...
Yeah, right. The moderator, Anil and Rupert, I think, are all British, and Tanya's an American, I think. Yeah,
I think so. I think there was definitely a noticeable tonal peacefulness and camaraderie and jovialness, in not the sense that it was lighthearted topic, but in the sense of we're all friends, and it was very beautiful. I was impressed.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. So of those three, did you, Tucker, maybe I'll start with you. Did you feel like you gravitated towards one point of view more than the other?
I liked pieces of what all three of them had to say. I probably just because of who I am, lean a little harder into the two men who were presenting, not because they're men, but just because the woman was much more of a spiritual, religious type aspect that is just not something I focus on.
Yeah.
But I did like the guy who talked about consciousness maybe being a field.
Yeah.
But I do kind of disagree with him on one aspect of that. I'm not sure. He talks a lot about you having the sense when somebody is staring at you.
Yes. Scopaesthesia is called.
And I do believe in that type of thing. But what I might disagree on is whether that's an aspect of our consciousness, or I think in my belief, I think we have more than 5 senses. I think we have 5 that are very developed and are kind of universally accepted, but I do believe that we are capable of detecting things beyond that.
Yeah, totally.
And my example would be like, you look at the Eastern philosophies and Eastern martial arts, and they talk about ki or chi,
right?
And this energy inside of you. Like, I've actually experienced that with several people. You can focus, and I don't pretend to know what it is, but you can focus an energy inside of yourself and force it to travel down your arm, let's say, and you can feel it in waves, like this energy, and it's kind of hard to describe, but it just feels like almost kind of like heat. I don't know, but it's this wave of energy that you can almost send through your extremities. Now, part of me says that that's very easy to just say that's something that I am creating in my own mind. It's something that's not really there, but I can make myself believe it's there. But where that disappears for me is you can experience that with other people. And I've done it with 2 people. Hammer would be one of them. Just doing certain martial arts things where you can feel their energy traveling back up your arm.
Wow.
And the other weird one was a girl I dated many years ago, but I was sitting there like holding her hand, practicing that. And as I would feel that wave leave my arm, she would look up at me every time it happened.
Wow.
And so it's like you have an ability to sense something that is not your 5 senses. Now, what that is, I don't know. I don't know that we have a scientific term for that.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily. Yeah, really, it kind of is, and that they talk about that in UFO circles when it involves consciousness, so they call it the woo. But I'm not fully convinced that that's our consciousness expanding beyond our meat cage.
Yeah.
I think that might just be us sensing a field that we can't hear, see, taste, smell, touch.
Yeah. It's just one of those things that we just don't know enough yet, right? Like, so all the more reason to keep researching it, investigating, like testing, hypothesizing. And I don't think I know it's not the same thing, but I wanted to share this experience that my grandma. I'm pretty sure that she picked this up like on a trip to Japan, China, when in like the 90s, I think. But I remember she came back, and I'm just gonna have to like explain what it is. It's kind of hard to describe it, but she told us. Let's see. I think we had my dad or my mom sit in a chair, and there was 4 of us that stood around my mom. I'll just say it was my mom sitting in a chair. So there was one person standing at her left knee, one at her right knee, one at her left shoulder, right shoulder. So we're kind of standing in that formation. And she told us to stack our hands on top of my mom's head, like alternate our hands, but not touch, like float, kind of have them there floating, don't touch hands. And just, it was something about the way she was explaining what to do that we were just focused on what she was saying. We weren't really thinking about other things. So something, I think that was key somehow, but we had our hands kind of like, stacked, not touching for 30 seconds, a minute, while she was explaining what we were going to do, which was when she counted to 3 or whatever, we were going to take our hands and put them together, but sort of form like a gun shape, or like our fingers are interlocked, except our index fingers are pointing out and our thumbs are pointing up, right? And we would take our pointed index fingers, and the people at the knees would put them under the knees, the people at the shoulders would put them on the shoulders, and we would lift my mom up. And I did miss a piece. We did that first. Like, that was the first thing, is try to do that. Just, we could see how hard it was to lift my mom up just like that. But there was something about holding our hands above her head, listening to my grandma say that when we did it after holding our hands there, it was like a feather. It was the gnarliest fucking thing. And I've done this like 2 or 3 times since then with people. I don't know what it is, but it's like you can all of a sudden lift this person straight up in the air, like, and it's effortless. It's fucking the weirdest thing. So, your explanation about the energy and stuff, like, whatever that's called, I don't know, but I've experienced that. It was cool as shit. I don't know how to explain it, but something magical, was there. It was awesome.
Well, and I think it all goes back to, we are not in the universe, we are the universe, and the universe is way weirder than any of us know.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just scratching the surface on what makes anything. I mean, we're kind of brute forcing it. We're building these giant particle accelerators and just creating these violent collisions and then looking at the pieces. Whereas, to me, that's kind of like cutting open a live animal to see how they work. Well,
oh, yeah.
You may see the pieces, but you no longer have the live animal. Like,
yeah. Yeah, interesting.
But I don't know. I think when it comes to consciousness, I really do think that we're capable of much more than we actually do. We just don't know how or why.
Yeah, early stages or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bob, what about you? Is there one of the 3 that kind of spoke to you more?
Definitely the first guy, Anil.
Yeah.
I think it's right on the nose for me, that we are so I believe that the consciousness is part of the mind. So I don't have I'm open to convincing, and I really like that. What was the third guy's name again, John?
Rupert Sheldrake.
Yeah, I really liked his point of view of bringing in the woo, if you will.
Yeah.
The way he went about it, I thought he did by far the best of anybody I've ever heard try to take that position, formally, and it was marvelous. I was very impressed. I don't have a subjective firsthand experience of either two that you guys do. So the things you just talked about, I could imagine that would color my perception, and I have not experienced that, so I don't have that kind of coloration of my perception. I do already agree with Anil that what we experience subjectively as consciousness is a hallucination. It is a 100% a model created by your subconscious. So just like when you're dreaming and you have a body when you're asleep, meaning when you're in your dream, you have a body, like there is a little you there, right? And you have experiences in your dream state. And what I find fascinating is being surprised by being in a dream, meaning we can go from laying in our bed as a conscious living creature, close our eyes, and then at some period of time we're embraced with another reality, virtual, but this new reality is compelling enough to trick us, at least somewhat, for a while, into believing that there's no gap between we were asleep in our PJs in bed with the electric blanket on, and now I'm in a safari riding an elephant or whatever, right?
Yeah, right.
And there's some, but it does work. I mean, it shouldn't work if it's real. Meaning, if our experience, our subjective experience of reality is the only thing that's real, meaning when it's out there, it's real. Whereas I like the idea of coinciding hallucinations. And here's my point. If you were sleepwalking, let's just say, and you are dreaming you're about to sit on a chair, and let's say there's no chair there. When you go and try to sit on that chair, you're going to fall down, regardless of what your dream says. But imagine you think it's like a royal throne, but in fact, it's just a stool. But you're actually sitting on something, right? There's something shared. So the perception of what is happening has to overlay some sort of reality for it to be meaningful and shared as this is real. What was the gentleman, what did he call the shared hallucination, John?
It's just, he said that, we're all hallucinating, and it was Anil, but we're all hallucinating all the time. But
we call it reality or something.
Yeah,
right?
when we agree about the hallucination, we call it reality. Yeah.
That's my point. So when you have the model being effectively representative of the reality that underlies it, we call that reality. But what we're experiencing is a model of that thing. It is not the real thing, such that you could have a psychedelic experience. You could have an out-of-body experience. You could have dreams. You could have all these manifestations of being trapped inside of a meat suit, which is impossible for you to explore outside of. It's just not a possibility, but you can experience, consciously, you can experience a model of this thing. And when it matches, you're very effective in your actions and your predictions. When it doesn't match, you got problems on your hands. So human, and I'm not going to go deep into the evolutionary side of it today, but I think that's really where we need to start with, is what is the fitness level of consciousness? What is it doing? How does it provide an evolutionary advantage to the primates that we are? And I would like to obviously call back on our previous conversation long time ago about how humans have evolved in and of themselves, from tree-dwelling monkey-type creatures or shrews or whatever, like way back in time, 60 million years ago. Like, what happened to get from there to here? And I think that's the root of the consciousness equation. And how do we really? Now, I don't have the woo side. I'm open to it. I like the Sheldrake's concept of testing these hypotheses using phantom limbs and people who are, ESP type people, and that could go back to you, Tucker, someone who felt chi. Maybe that person, and I'm sure that's probably ringing a bell for you when he talked about having phantom limb syndrome people, test their phantom limb through a physical barrier, then to be observed by one of these masters of perception. What did you think about that experiment?
I think it's a good experiment. I mean, I'd like to dig a little further into how many experiments like that have actually been done and kind of look at the results. But, you brought up sleepwalking, and I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that. And it doesn't happen to me very often, but it has happened probably a dozen times that I can recall. And it's usually when I'm super stressed out or life's just hard. But the fact that your brain can wake your body up and navigate you around an environment without hurting yourself when you're not driving is really uncanny and kind of unsettling. Because you're navigating the environment that's usually, requires your consciousness. But your consciousness is not there. You're not driving at that point. You're just a passenger. And
John,
It's weird.
Sean, do you remember that blindsided monkey experiment?
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's exactly it. So Tucker, were you familiar? I can't remember if John shared that with you. There's this old timey experiment where they took out the visual cortex of, I can't remember what kind of monkey it was, and they were just doing random experiments on this thing. And one of the experimenters thought he recognized that this thing kind of shows like it's able to see. And he did this thing where he took a treat and he held it out to the monkey, and the monkey was kind of like creeping around, and eventually he kind of got close, and he reached out and he took the treat. And then this guy was like, what in the holy fuck is going on? And he started doing all these experiments with like putting obstacles on the floor and stuff. And lo and behold, this monkey who had no visual cortex, it was literally unable to perceive vision, period. It was still navigating these obstacle courses, etc., meaning like in a sleepwalk. And so his theory was that this monkey, because it couldn't do it when it got emotional. When the monkey got stressed and emotional and freaking out, it could not navigate these test courses. But if it was just a calm and normal thing, it was like it could walk around the room. It was bananas. And so the guy figured out the eyes still work. The optic nerve still works. The monkey's subconscious can see. And so he was navigating, or she was navigating, by essentially feeling its way, not physically touch feeling, but feeling like it feels good to go this way, or it feels, not good to step on this thing or whatever. And so I think there's a very real sense of the body operating at different levels. System 1 and System 2 is another metaphor for this. And I think they brought this up, where you do have this automatic or instant response section, the System 1, that takes over when time is of the essence, or it's a repetitive task, like driving. You don't have to think about driving. I can have a conversation. I could be eating a French fry. I could be listening to a podcast, and I'm still driving. I'm totally safe. Well, I'm not even thinking about driving. That's why it's totally safe, because that's all automatically now processed, because it's a habitual act for me, and it's in my cerebellum now, and it's just a routine fine motor skill. But if I want to come across something novel, something I've never seen before, I got to use my consciousness. So let's just, you're walking in the woods and you see a snare and you've never seen a snare before, but it would probably ring your bell in that's not a natural thing. Why is that tree bent over? Why is there a string hanging off of it? Why is it in a noose shape? I'm using noose, obviously, but you know what I mean? Like, you would be able to then look at it as a novelty and try to break down, deduce what is going on here. And I think that is above the subconscious level then. And so you would not be able to recognize that in a sleepwalking state or in the blind monkey state. So there's like variations of how these systems play in an adaptive fitness level.
Yeah, they talked about the adaptability of the brain itself too, with like the guy. There was a story, I think the moderator brought it up, about a guy that was studying hydroencephalopathy. I can't remember how the encephalopathy, maybe whatever. It's a condition with like your brain keeps, or your brain keeps producing. Sorry, I know I'm doing a terrible job here, but there's like liquid or water production in your head that doesn't stop, basically.
Cerebral spinal fluid. It's cerebral spinal fluid.
Fluid. Yeah, I was saying water. Anyway, fluid. And this guy, was studying it, and he said for a laugh they just decided to like scan this dude's brain, and they found out like he only had like 15% of the brain like capacity, because he had this hydroencephalopathy or whatever, and it was they had no idea.
He was he was very proficient.
Yeah.
He was like going to PhD program or something.
Yeah. And then Anil mentioned he watched a brain surgery happening where this young kid, can't remember the age, maybe between 5 and 8 or something, and I can't remember if it was brain tumors or cancer or something, but the decision was to sever the connection between the left and right hemisphere.
Epilepsy.
Yes, right. He was having like epileptic seizures like multiple times a day, and that's what they decided to do. And the kid was fine like pretty quickly. Like his the one half of his brain kind of adapted. And it was early. That was kind of the point Anil was making, that they did this kind of early. He's like, if you took half my brain now, I would not be fine. He says, but
So John, what's your point of view? I
yeah.
don't think
So
you haven't made your claim yet.
right, yeah, and then this will probably be good to get to a stopping point too, that we just kind of preface the conversation this way. I will say to the sleepwalking thing, I think I only have one memory, and it's one of those things. I was so young, I have the memory of people telling me I did this, but I think I was like 4 or 5 or something, and I'd fallen asleep on the couch. It was in our living room. We had one of those like console TVs like back in the day, like on the floor, big cabinet thing with a TV in it, whatever. And so the story that I hear is that I got up and I walked over and I stood in front of it and I started peeing all over it, because apparently I was sleepwalking and thought I was peeing in the toilet. And I wonder if, because I don't think that's happened to me since. I mean, not just specifically peeing on a TV, but sleepwalking. I don't know if it was just a one-off thing, or if somehow it was like, I probably was pretty embarrassed. I mean, like, I don't remember my parents like being mean about it, but it was like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? That was like a kind of like, oh wow, I did that. Oh my God. And anyway, so curious.
So what happens when you're sleepwalking? If you get woken up, is that a wives' tale, or are you not supposed to wake them up?
I
heard
believe
that
that's a wives' tale.
Yeah.
I think it's more, you don't want to startle somebody in a way that they could injure themselves, or
Yeah. Probably be like gentle with it. Mike Birbiglia, the comedian Mike Birbiglia, has like a great, I think his whole special is called Sleepwalk with Me, or maybe it's a book also, but
is.
he's told famous, I mean, I think he's kind of worked through it, and he doesn't sleepwalk as much, but for a long time he had to sleep in a sleeping bag with oven mittens on. I mean, that's how he had to sleep, because he has this story that like it was, the final straw or whatever. In his dream, he was um he was going to win an award or something, and he had to like he was on like the second place podium, but it wasn't the second place, he won first place, so he had to climb up on the first place podium to stand. And he was in a hotel room on the second floor of a hotel, climbing on the dresser and stuff, like climbing on the furniture. And then at some point, I feel like Brad Pitt was involved, but now I can't remember exactly. But at some point, it became clear in his dream that like some missile was headed toward them, and he had to like get the hell out of there. And he jumped out of the window, second story, and landed on the ground. And he was okay. He didn't like break any limbs, if I remember right. But that was the moment he was like, I need to do something about this. I can't
Yikes.
keep like. So I think that's one of the things he did. Is sleeping bag, oven mittens. Anyway, so to get back to my point about, or I mean, my take on the three, yeah, it's hard to gravitate to one, because they all say like such cool things. The scopaesthesia stuff, like that's really fascinating. I will say, he mentions that in the debate that he's working on an app that'll be on his website to kind of do this staring detection stuff. I did not find an app, but there's like a page on his website that you can kind of participate in this study, which is cool. I wanted to do it with the fam, but haven't done it yet. But by next week, I'm pretty sure I'll have time to do it. That sounds really cool.
Predicting who calls you, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. He also, this is just a small thing, but I thought it was neat. One of the first things he says in his opening remarks is about in Indian philosophy, there's this idea that we don't really see what's there. We experience Maya. He said it's like a magical veil of illusion. Well, there's this death metal band called Veil of Maya. And I was like, oh, maybe that must be where they got their name. That's so cool. Anyway, so I liked what he had to say. Tanya Lerman, the anthropologist, that's really fascinating. And that one seems, in a way, maybe kind of want to say like the least scientific. Like it seems like she's much more about talking to people, getting kind of firsthand experiences of things. That resonates a lot with me. The whole talk about, experience. She mentions topomancy. We'll get into that next time, I think. But the topo thing was really interesting. I see in the agenda here. So she said she was talking about, people having experiences that feel like they aren't their own, like they're happening to them more than happening from the inside out. And she specifically said something like a poet feeling like they have to capture the poem before it disappears. And I think this must have been you, Bob. You came into the agenda, but like I just wanted to make sure that was in there. So yeah, that that resonated with me. And then of course Anil, I mentioned in the beginning, like his hallucination thing is really cool idea. Two things I'll say real quick before we wrap up this episode. He was so quotable, and one of the quotes I loved, I think this was in his opening remarks as well, but he said, the beauty of science is the ability to be productively wrong so that our collective understanding always ratchets upward. It's such like a beautiful imagery with that, productively wrong, and then and this is great because this kind of ties into Tucker. When you shared this the YouTube video originally, you pulled out this Emily Dickinson quote that Anil, I think he closes his opening remarks with. So I think we'll have, this will be a fun kind of close on this episode, is talking about what we think this means. And by the way, Emily Dickinson, isn't that the same kind of time as Jane Austen? It's like early 1800s. I should have looked that up, but I said that because of all things, convinced me to watch Pride and Prejudice yesterday. Continue to like consider these things. Like I've been in this, Dunes universe, and for a while, and what's something that's like the last thing I would want to probably, that I would gravitate towards. And she loves it. It came up because of the music. There's really beautiful piano melody in that movie. And so anyway, it was just a fun kind of coincidence because I think Emily Dickinson, I think it's around that same time.
I think it is.
And
yeah.
Anyway, so the Emily Dickinson quote, and there's so much in here. I think this will be fun to really what does this mean exactly? The brain is wider than the sky, or put them side by side. The one the other will contain with ease, and you besides. What does that mean to you guys?
To me, it just speaks to our ability to imagine things that aren't necessarily what we're experiencing. And I don't know that we'll ever know, but to me it's a very human thing. I don't know that other animals experience imagination the way we do, but we can, our consciousness contains the universe. Like it's all in there. And there's even been CIA papers released about astral traveling and the whole men that stare at goats thing. And it's like, I don't want to speak to it scientifically because I don't know that the science is there yet. But I think we, in some way, interact with reality in ways we don't understand. And that could be through fields, through quantum entanglement. I don't know. But I think it speaks to the knowing who's calling you before you pick up. There's some sort of information being transferred in a way we don't understand, maybe.
Yeah.
And that we pick up on it in a way that we don't understand, and we just kind of accept it. But I don't know. I think it just speaks to, as small as we are, our capacity just to create in our mind is bigger than us.
Yeah. Bob, what about you? That quote.
I would second that. I think he's right on for what it means, and I'll shine a light on it like this. I think that the concept of God is the differentiator between, say, humans and what we call animals. In that, imagine if God is symbolically, the concept of God is the question of what is God, meaning a nonsensical question. There is no direction to point out God. God is this supposition based off of like a blind watchmaker thing, where you're walking on the beach and you find this watch and it's just sitting there and you pick it up and you can't think that this wasn't made by something or someone. It's just too perfect. It just doesn't make any sense. So once the animal begins to observe things and see beauty in them for the first time, becomes imaginative, that's when you can hold the entire contents of the sky and yourself included, the entire universe, like Tucker said, you can have it all in your imagination. So it's this one gift of being able to have nonsense made real in your mind. That is the difference maker between a human form of animal and a non-human form of animal. And I think it interplays off of this duality of self, meaning a subconscious and a consciousness. And even when you're by yourself, you have this interplay of cognition on multiple levels, system 1 and system 2. And so even there, you're using metaphor or poetry to translate from yourself to yourself. So your hidden subconscious self needs to use the metaphor in order to become apparent to your conscious self, which then is able to narrate what is happening and explain it with the abstraction of language. And so it's like this interplay back and forth. And I think that poem itself is one of the most genius things I've ever heard. I mean, it floored me when that was brought up. So
Yeah.
Well done on Emily. Good job there.
I know for sure. Even because my wife somewhat familiar with Emily Dickinson, and she was like, she wrote that. Like it seemed like it was like, wow. Yeah, for me, on one hand, the flow of the words and the way it sounds, I don't care what it means. It sounds really cool. It's just like flows in a way, like especially the way the one the other will contain with these than you besides. It just, it doesn't need to mean anything for me on one hand, because I just love the way the words sound. It sounds like music to my ears. I love it for that reason. But meaning wise, yeah, I don't think I would disagree with what you guys are saying. It's interesting because I would say there's sort of three subjects. I think what I get from it, there's the brain, the sky, and you. And the you part, maybe we can put that aside for a second, but like the brain and the sky, do you think she's being prescriptive about saying, put the brain and the sky next to each other, the one the other will contain with ease? Do you think she's specifically talking about one of those things being the thing that contains the other, or do you think it's open-ended that either one could be the thing that contains the other? Do you know what I mean?
I think it's her, and it could just be the way I interpret it, but I think it's her saying, when you hold your brain up against the sky, clearly the sky is bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But at any point in time, you can create the sky in your brain. You can imagine it clear as day, even if you were in the darkest cave. The sky is still in your brain.
I would focus on the with ease. I think it's the with ease is what allows you to think of, not only to your point, you could in a darkened cave imagine the sky, you could imagine a million different skies, variations of the sky. And so I think it's obviously the sky in a physical sense could include your brain on a physical sense, the 3-4 pounds of tapioca between your ears or whatever. But
right.
but I think that the infinite the unboundedness. No matter how big the sky is, I think Emily's point is it's bound. There's something physical, real there that gives you an edge, and the brain knows no edge, meaning the concept of imagination and the ability to think of nonsense. This is the human part that is. I can't even imagine at this point a machine doing it, literally, right? I mean, this is the concept of, AI. How's it ever going to dream, kind of a thing? So the concept of nonsense, but making it real and meaningful such that it allows you to encode, a message within it. That is ultimately this human thing. And poets are the ones that are best able to feel and then express. I think, John, to your point, that the feeling of the words, this is what grabs us. It's the beauty that grabs you, the beauty of the rainbow. So I've thought of this, like how many cows in the field, when I look at a rainbow and there's cows sitting, their heads down, they're eating grass. They don't see the rainbow. I mean, I'm sure they see it. They see the photons of light, but they don't experience the rainbow as a beautiful thing. They don't have the sense of wonder at a virtual image and the trickery it's playing upon you. It just doesn't make any impact upon them, and that's the difference maker, I think, is art. The feeling of experiencing something that has its own value and content and weight to it. So it's all encapsulated in this very brief piece of poetry, and that is the summary of this goal of the podcast. It should have said a poet. So they should have said Emily Dickinson. They should have said her into the wormhole is the take-home message here.
Yes, ding ding ding. Love it.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, and kind of to go back on what I said earlier, it's like I have to imagine that other creatures have some degree of imagination. Like I could see a cat sitting there looking at a toy mouse going, what if I did this? But I don't really think any other creature that we know of has the ability to just sit there and create stories in their mind the way we do. I think we are able to use our brain to take ourselves out of equations and just to create stories that don't involve us or our needs or our desires. We're able just to create stories for the sake of creating the story. And I think, to my knowledge, that's what sets us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom that we know of. I was
gonna say so far. Like, it's really interesting just from my own perspective in the last year or two. Tucker, you might remember, probably like 2 years ago, I was on this like quick kick thing. In fact, it was around a year ago, Bob, because I think I told you too. Like I got very sort of fascinated or obsessed or fixated on this idea that humans are the only species that have created like a global, the only species, as far as we're aware, that have created like a global communication network that works across the gigantic vastness of our planet. No other species, as far as we know, has done anything remotely like that. And I think maybe it was a hubris thing, maybe, or whatever. I was kind of just so fixated on it that I think I was neglecting like how fascinating communication with other species is, regardless if they can do it across the planet or not. You know what I mean? And so one of the things is, we were talking about the squirrels and stuff earlier. Like, it does make me wonder. Like, and dogs. Like, I know my dog can understand some English words. She knows her name. She knows sit. I know my dog isn't the best example. There's dogs that are highly trained, and there is some kind of understanding happening. And Bob, you were talking about art. The Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado Springs here, you could go there and see, like, they have some of the animals doing art. You can buy art pieces that like a skunk did, or a sloth, or like, they're.
But
It's
does
like,
the
I wonder
art
if
make
there's
the
this.
does the art make the skunk feel like anything though? That's my point. Is the
Yeah,
art, so when you
I
look at the art, yeah, the skunk made the art, but did the skunk, like if other skunks look at it, does it make them feel like there's some kind of, like
yeah.
when you listen to the
So
Emily poem, it makes you want to know, what does that mean? Because it feels like something.
yeah, what I think I'm getting at is, I don't know how long animal art in zoos has been going on, but I'm guessing it's not hundreds of years. Like, what if this is a shift that, like, in the past generation or two, maybe if it started, that we're continuing it on because we love animals so much, and maybe we are trying to humanize animals. I mean, have you heard Bob and Tom play this clip all the time, but it's someplace, Sweden or Norway, dolphin and whale studies and stuff, and trying to like teach language to dolphins and whales, and it's really gnarly. Sometimes the clips that Bob and Tom get to read, that end up in the news, make it sound like, oh, this is really fascinating. There's like, I think maybe it was a beluga whale or something, was like, could count, 1, 2, 3, but you hear the audio of it and it's like, no, not yet. It's just making noises, but it's mirroring a tone. The human is saying 1, 2, 3, and going up on the 3, and the whale is like mimicking that tone on the third sound to go up. It's like really fascinating. So what I'm getting at is like, yeah, today, no, I don't think the skunk feels the way that we do it, with the art. But what if we keep doing this? Like, I don't know
I'm
gestational
saying,
periods of
what if,
skunks, but like, what if hundreds of generations of skunks that are doing this? Yeah, why wouldn't they start to feel something? You
Well,
know?
we've talked about it
I'm saying,
before. I don't think humans always had the capabilities that we do today. If you go back far enough, I think it's an imagination, and our level of consciousness is a product of evolution. And there's no saying that other animals than humans are not undergoing that same evolutionary process.
Yeah,
agreed,
yeah.
agreed. And biology is a spectrum. And so
Hmm.
you're going to get, edge cases, and it's going to bleed in from one to the next. And ultimately, though, I'm trying to make a very narrow case, in that the imagination is defined by being able to believe in nonsense, a nonsensical proposition, something that doesn't have any evidence for. It's faith based. It's back to the Sagan thing. The imagination could be unlimited, unbounded. You could be in a cave and imagining what's outside the cave without ever being outside the cave.
Hmm.
And so there's something about that is a special kind of classification, other than what we're talking about interspecies wise. And I do believe, octopus have emotions, and, dolphins are intelligent, and, chimpanzees are, very closely related to us. So they're sharing these experiences. And, if anybody's going to have art, it's probably a bonobo or something like that. But the ability to have very narrowly defined, nonsensical propositions, imagining things that not only you don't know if they really exist, but you could never know if they really exist or not. These things are unknowable, and I think that's reserved for humanity.
Forever, or just right now?
Yeah, just for right now, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, evolution is a process, but what I'm getting
Right.
at is, right now, the magic
Yeah.
sloth isn't just making decisions, meaning
Yeah.
problem solving in the real world. The magic sauce is imagining things that aren't in evidence, having faith in,
Yeah.
whatever the explorer is having faith in, that they're going to get where they're going. That's special.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, life in general is, we're going to make it simple, is the ability to interact with the environment. You're not just a rock, you're able to move and interact with your environment. But I think humanity has this ability to entertain ideas that are not grounded in the physical reality that sets us
Exactly.
apart.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
not grounded in the physical reality. That's what I'm trying to say is the ability to have belief or imagine even the capability of something that is not grounded at all in reality. That is very special. I don't know of an example of any other animal doing
Who
that.
has a
Not that it
god,
can't.
right? I mean, like, yeah, it's kind of, it's
Well,
kind
that's
of,
the benchmark of religion is why it's a defining moment in humanity, is that religion is a very unique, let's just say, close in religion. I don't know of anything else, but like things that are very, very unique to the human animal, something that seems to set us apart from, say, warm-bloodedness or being a mammal or
yeah,
having brains and eyes and all the rest. I mean, everything we share with everybody else. So back to the consciousness, what makes this special sauce so special? And I'm trying to narrowly define this one ability to not be grounded in reality. I don't think any other animals have this ability, and it's both madness and genius.
yeah. I like how you
And it
said
goes,
that. Yeah. Madness, right?
no, it is 100%.
Yeah.
It could be madness or genius, but animals don't seem to have the unbounded nature of imagination. Now, I do grant, cats will imagine what is the mouse going to do next and all that. And I think that is the process. It's just predictive modeling, the ability to predict what comes next in your lucid hallucination. And the better you are at it, the more fitness you have. And obviously, demonstrably, humans are, the top of the pyramid on Earth in that we, control our environment.
Yeah.
Now, I got to tell this story real quick because I think it's funny in its own right. This resort we've stayed at down in Cozumel, it's very much like kind of like an eco-themed resort. It's built in the middle of the jungle, basically, right on the coast, and they left as much of the native jungle there as they could, and just kind of built these little huts around there. And I mean, the wild animals are as much a part of that resort as any humans. There's iguanas everywhere. There's I forget it's related to a raccoon kind of little small mammal type thing that they're everywhere, crabs, but they also have a macaw, right?
Mm.
And where this macaw's at is kind of near the pool. It's within hearing shot of the pool. And I noticed this macaw had this weird, it knew some words and stuff, but it would scream like a kid screaming.
Mm.
And I'm going, that macaw learned that if it can sound like a screaming kid, somebody would come check on it.
Totally.
Wow.
It reminds me of the YouTube algorithm or whatever. It's just, it doesn't matter Facebook. It doesn't matter how to get your attention. It's just going to figure out the thing that pushes your button the very
Yeah.
best.
Right.
That's very impressive. That's a great metaphor there, because I think it's using the same thing, which is correlation, right? It doesn't understand anything about making a child and how scared you would be. It just knows after this.
Cause and effect. Yeah.
Totally. 100%.
Yeah.
That's a really, really powerful crystallization of that concept.
Excellent. I think that's probably a good place to wrap up too. Yeah. Should we do over under betting again on how many
I'm gonna say 3.
episodes?
I'm gonna be 3.
Three is where I was at.
3.
Yeah.
So 3.5 or 2.5, just for the.
I think 3.5 is the line. I think 3.5 is the line probably.
Yeah. I don't know where I'm at yet, but yeah, I think I might be going. I don't know. Maybe I'll just take the under just to be different. But
There you go.
but we can call this the half, right? I mean, this is fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is standard podcasting kind of protocol to like do half topics. I don't care. I think it's really neat that we're like tying it together in this way. So we're just going to keep doing this.
I can say I don't think anybody will ever be able to accuse us of having a team of writers behind our podcast.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly.
No, it's a good flow though. I like the stitching together of the topics, and it felt it didn't feel like a transition. It felt like it had meaning in and of itself, which is a phenomenal occurrence. Whether it was emergent or you did it on purpose, I don't know. But the way we stitched these two topics together was it actually made the podcast so special to me that you just what do you segue? That's what I'm trying to say. Segue.
Oh, yeah.
The segue was
Yeah.
was valuable in and of itself in a very poetic way, and I mean that on many levels, of course, but a very poetic way.
Fitting, right? That's what we do here. If you like, if you enjoy, yeah, leave a review, and you can get a hold of us at sendingpoets@gmail.com. And so we will be looking forward to continuing this discussion next week. Till then, yeah, thank you guys. I love these conversations. It's going to be a fascinating topic to keep digging into. There's so many good points that are brought up, so can't wait for that. So to close, as we like to do here, with this quote from John Adams, "You'll never be alone with a poet in your pocket."